One night for freedom, she owes a debt. He wants her baby, but now he wants her heart. One contract changed everything forever. The weight of inheritance. Vivienne Monroe stood outside the gilded doors of the Langham Hotel, her second-hand dress clinging awkwardly to her frame. The invitation in her trembling hand felt like a cruel joke, a charity gala for London's elite, and she was here only because her former university roommate needed to fill a table. Inside, champagne flowed like water, each glass probably worth more than her monthly rent. Outside, Vivi carried the crushing weight of 800,000 pounds in debt, a poisoned gift from a father who had vanished into the night after destroying their family. Her phone buzzed. Another threatening message from the loan sharks. Her stomach twisted. They had given her 2 weeks. 2 weeks to produce money she would never have, not in this lifetime. Her mother's tearful face flashed in her mind, and Vivi's resolve hardened. She would protect her mother and younger sister, no matter what it took. She stepped inside. A cold proposition. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the laughter of people who had never known desperation. Vivi felt like a ghost among them, invisible in her simple dress. She clutched a glass of champagne she couldn't afford to buy herself and tried to blend into the shadows near the tall windows overlooking the city. "You look uncomfortable." The voice was deep, smooth, and entirely unexpected. Vivi turned to find a man watching her with unsettling intensity. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than her car. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes were a striking gray that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed composure. "I'm fine," she lied, taking a sip of champagne. "You're lying." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something crisp and cold, like winter air. Julian Blackwell. She recognized the name immediately. Everyone in London did. Blackwell Investments was one of the most powerful firms in the city, and Julian Blackwell was known as the Ice King, a man who built empires with ruthless efficiency and zero emotional attachment. "Vivienne Monroe," she replied carefully. "Though, I'm surprised you're talking to me. Don't billionaires usually stick to their own tax bracket?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. "I prefer observing people who don't belong. They're more honest." He gestured to the crowd around them. "These people lie with every breath. You, on the other hand, are desperately trying not to be here at all." Vivi's defenses rose. "If you're trying to insult me, I'm trying to make you an offer." She blinked. "Excuse me?" The devil's bargain. Julian guided her to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from curious eyes. His expression remained neutral, businesslike, as if he were about to discuss stock portfolios rather than whatever strange proposition he had in mind. "I've been watching you for the past hour," he said bluntly. "You check your phone obsessively. You're terrified of something, and judging by that dress and those shoes, you're not here because you can afford to be." Vivi's cheeks burned. "Get to the point." "I need an heir." The words were delivered with the same emotion one might use to order coffee. "My mother is relentless about continuing the Blackwell legacy. I have no interest in a traditional marriage or emotional entanglements, but I need a child to satisfy her demands and secure certain family assets." Vivi stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want me to what, exactly?" "Carry my child. In exchange, I'll clear whatever debt is making you check your phone every 30 seconds and pay you an additional 500,000 pounds once the child is born." He pulled out a business card and pressed it into her hand. "Think about it. You have 48 hours. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing there with her mind reeling and her heart pounding. The decision Vivi didn't sleep that night. She sat at her tiny kitchen table in her cramped flat, staring at Julian, Blackwell's business card as if it might burst into flames. The offer was insane. Completely, utterly insane. And yet, her phone lit up with another threat. Final warning. We know where your mother lives. Vivi's hands shook as she picked up the card and dialed the number. Julian answered on the first ring. Your answer? I have conditions, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I want everything in writing, legal contracts that protect me and my family. And if I do this, if I agree to this arrangement, you don't get to treat me like property. Agreed. My driver will pick you up tomorrow at noon. We'll finalize the details with my lawyer. The line went dead. Moving day Julian's penthouse occupied the top floor of a sleek glass tower in Canary Wharf. The space was breathtaking and utterly sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased panoramic views of London, but inside, everything was cold marble, sharp edges, and monochrome perfection. Not a single personal item in sight. No photographs, no plants, no color. It looked like a luxury hotel room, not a home. Vivi set down her single battered suitcase and turned to find Julian watching her with that same unreadable expression. The guest room is yours, he said, gesturing down a hallway. I'm rarely here. I work late most nights. You'll have privacy. This is the strangest arrangement I've ever heard of, Vivi muttered more to herself than to him. It's a business transaction, Julian replied coolly. Nothing more. But as Vivi unpacked her few belongings in the pristine guest room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil himself. The first cracks. For the first 2 weeks, they barely spoke. Julian left for work before dawn and returned after midnight. Vivi spent her days photographing London's hidden corners for her freelance assignments and trying not to feel like an intruder in the cold, empty penthouse. Then, one evening, she decided to cook. She found the kitchen untouched, the expensive appliances still wrapped in protective plastic. Rolling up her sleeves, she made a simple pasta with tomato sauce and garlic bread, filling the penthouse with warmth and the scent of real food. Julian came home to find her curled up on the sofa, eating directly from the pan while watching a documentary about street photography. He stopped in the doorway, staring at her as if she were an alien species. Did you cook? He asked, his tone caught between confusion and something else. Yes. There's extra if you want some. She didn't look. Up from the screen. Julian hesitated, then walked to the kitchen. A moment later, he returned with a plate of pasta and sat on the opposite end of the sofa, as far from her as possible. They ate in silence, but Vivi noticed he finished every bite. The pregnancy test. 6 weeks after Vivi moved in, she stood in the bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Her hands trembled as she walked into the living room where Julian sat reviewing financial reports. It worked, she said quietly, holding up the test. Julian's eyes flickered to the test, then to her face. For a brief moment, something unguarded crossed his expression, too fast for her to identify. Then the mask slipped back into place. Good, he said simply. I'll arrange for the best prenatal care. But as Vivi turned to leave, she heard him release a long, shaky breath, as if he'd been holding it for years. The ice, she realized, had just begun to crack. Melting the ice. The first gesture morning sickness hit Vivi like a freight train. For 3 weeks straight, she could barely keep anything down. She'd drag herself to the bathroom at dawn, trying to be quiet, but Julian's penthouse had excellent acoustics. One particularly brutal morning, she emerged from the bathroom to find Julian standing in the hallway, still dressed in his pajamas, a rare sight. In his hands he held a glass of ginger tea and plain crackers arranged on a plate. My assistant researched remedies, he said stiffly, not meeting her eyes. This is supposed to help. Vivi took the offering, too surprised to speak. Julian disappeared into his room immediately, as if embarrassed by his own kindness. But the next morning, the ginger tea appeared again, and the morning after that. Unexpected companionship. As Vivi's belly began to show, something shifted between them. Julian started coming home earlier. He claimed it was to ensure she had everything she needed, but Vivi noticed he'd begun sitting on the sofa while she cooked, pretending to work on his laptop while actually watching her move around the kitchen. One evening, she made a bold move. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and handed him a bowl of soup. "Try it," she said. "I promise it won't kill you." Julian took the bowl, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. He tasted the soup, and his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "It's good," he admitted grudgingly. Vivi grinned. Was that a compliment? From the Ice King himself? Don't push your luck, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. The breaking point. Fear. Months into the pregnancy, everything changed. Vivi's father resurfaced, showing up drunk at the penthouse demanding money. The doorman called Julian immediately. By the time Julian arrived, Derek Monroe was making a scene in the lobby, shouting about his daughter living in luxury while he suffered. Vivi stood frozen in the elevator bay, tears streaming down her face, one hand protectively over her belly. Julian's reaction was swift and terrifying. His usual cold composure shattered into something fierce and protective. He stepped between Vivi and her father, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "If you ever come near her again," Julian said quietly, "I will destroy you in ways you cannot imagine. Security will escort you out. If you contact her, her mother, or her sister again, I will ensure you disappear into a legal hell you won't escape from." Derek stumbled backward, finally seeing the danger in Julian's eyes. Security removed him, and the lobby fell silent. Julian turned to Vivi, and for the first time his expression was completely unguarded. Concern, anger on her behalf, and something deeper flickered in his gray eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, reaching out to gently wipe a tear from her cheek. Vivi collapsed against him, sobbing. And Julian, the man who claimed to feel nothing, wrapped his arms around her and held her tightly, his chin resting on top of her head. "You're safe," he murmured. "I promise you're safe." The confession. That night they sat together on the sofa, closer than ever before. Vivi's head rested on Julian's shoulder, her hand on her belly where their daughter kicked gently. "Why did you really choose me?" Vivi asked quietly. "Out of everyone. Why me?" Julian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he could no longer hide. "Because you were real," he said. "Everyone in my world lies, manipulates, wants something from me. But you, standing there in that borrowed dress, terrified and desperate but still holding your head high, you were honest. And I thought, if I have to do this, if I have to bring a child into the world, I want them to have your strength, your warmth." Vivi turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "Julian, I know this was supposed to be a transaction," he continued, his eyes meeting hers with startling vulnerability. "But somewhere along the way, Vivian, you became something more. You brought life into this place, into me." Her breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I don't want you to leave after the baby comes." His hand covered hers on her belly. "I want you to stay. Both of you. Not because of a contract, but because He swallowed hard. "Because I love you." Claire's arrival, when each even need. Vivi went into labor on a rainy October morning. Julian transformed into someone she'd never seen before. The composed businessman vanished, replaced by a man utterly terrified and completely devoted. He held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, his own hands shaking. When the nurses tried to make him leave, Vivi clutched him tighter. "Stay," she gasped. "Please stay." He didn't leave her side for a second. When their daughter finally entered the world, her first cries filling the delivery room, Julian's face transformed. Tears streamed down his cheeks as the nurse placed the tiny, perfect baby in his arms. "Hello, Claire," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm your daddy." Vivi, exhausted but glowing, watched the man she loved fall completely apart as he held their daughter. The Ice King was gone forever, melted away by a love he'd never expected to feel. The wedding. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, they married on a small boat on the Thames. No elaborate ceremony, no hundreds of guests. Just Vivi's mother and sister, Julian's mother, who had softened considerably upon meeting her granddaughter, and a handful of close friends. Vivi wore a simple cream dress. Julian held baby Claire in one arm while he said his vows, his voice steady and sure. "You taught me that the best things in life can't be bought or negotiated," he said, looking into Vivi's eyes. "You taught me that love isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that matters. And I promise to spend every day proving that I'm worthy of you and our daughter." Vivi cried happy tears as she said her vows, promising to keep melting his heart every single day for the rest of their lives. Epilogue. Home. 6 months later, the penthouse was unrecognizable. Colorful toys scattered across the floor. Photographs covered the walls. Plants thrived on every available surface. The kitchen always smelled like something delicious cooking. Julian came home early, as he did every day now, to find Vivi and Claire dancing in the living room to silly music. Claire, now 9 months old, squealed with laughter as her mother spun her around. Julian set down his briefcase and joined them, scooping his daughter into his arms and pulling Vivi close. "This," he murmured, kissing Vivi softly while Claire giggled between them. "This is everything." Vivi smiled against his lips. Who knew the Ice King had such a warm heart underneath? "You did," Julian replied, his eyes full of love. "You knew all along." As the three of them swayed together in their warm, chaotic, perfectly imperfect home, Julian realized that the best investment he'd ever made wasn't in stocks or properties. It was in love, and it had given him returns beyond anything he could have ever calculated. Thank you for experiencing this emotional journey with Every Verse Stories. If this tale touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our community of storytelling. Lovers, let's keep spreading warmth, hope, and love together.